Okay, let's call in the MPs to discuss this and more. Marco Mendicino is a Liberal parliamentary secretary. He hails from Toronto. Karen Vecchio is a Conservative MP from southwestern Ontario. Nathan Cullen, an NDP MP from northern British Columbia. Welcome to the gang. Nice to have you back.
Welcome back, Nathan.
Do you want me to put my cell phone away? Is this
well, I don't know if that size matters apparently when it comes to cell phones now. But I guess I'm curious, like, how far do we go in following what could be a political edict? Because Donald Trump's trying to whip up some concern about terrorism from these countries, or maybe it's a legitimate safety one. Nathan, what do you think we should do?
Wouldn't mind seeing some evidence. Right, first of all, because never let the facts get in the way of a good argument when Donald Trump is involved. Right, he is, of course. There's politics all over the place in this. He tried to ban Muslims from certain countries coming in. That failed. He was defeated at the courts because the Americans still have a constitution. Last we checked, and so now to his base, so-called base, he's got to be able to show something. And so now they're going after specific countries and saying, well, you can't bring your laptops and such on board. If there's actual evidence that it is more dangerous to carry these things on than it isn't, that's something Canada has to, of course, look at. But the authorship is worrisome, right? From my perspective, Donald Trump doesn't have a lot of credibility when he talks about the need for security and how he goes about it, because it seems to be such a mix of xenophobia / racism at times that the actual evidence just disappears. He'll just make the argument. So, of course, Canada has to do due diligence, but I would hate us to follow simply because the White House has said this is where we're going, because then Canadians are suddenly going to be impacted by decisions made out of Mr. Trump's mind at 3 o'clock in the morning.
But we are part of the Five Eyes Security Alliance, Karen. We should have the same information that the U.S. and U.K. have, shouldn't we?
Well, I agree with Nathan. We should see the evidence on this as well. When it comes to security, that has to be paramount. The safety of Canadians, the safety of air passengers, of course, that's got to be paramount. But we have to see that there's going to be an issue here. Whether you're boarding a plane with your iPad on or in checked luggage, is there not going to be a security issue either or? So I think we've got to look at that and see what the balance is. But, I mean, let's not just ban and say this is what we're going to do. We also have to look at the fact that when people are traveling, you're traveling from Canada into the United States or United States into Canada, and maybe going those third countries as well will travel. It's going to cause a lot of complications for travelers, but safety must be paramount. But we have to be smart when making these decisions, that's for sure.
To me, the security would be more intense if you're carrying something into the cabin than the cargo. There was always the cargo bin was seen as the weaker of the two. Marco, what's your perception on this?
Well, I guess what we're hearing is that advancements in technology mean that we don't just rely on traditional experiences when it comes to what's in the cargo as opposed to what's in the cabin. And certainly the minister conveyed that the government takes very seriously the safety of Canadians, including on-air travel. We were made aware through our partners and our allies, United States, about recent intelligence, and that information is being reviewed very carefully, which is what Canadians would expect. And so what's important is not that we treat the issue rather glibly. I know, welcome back, Nathan, to the panel, but that we actually review the information that has been provided to us carefully so that we can ensure that Canadians can travel to and from Canada safely.
And the problem, of course, not to be glib about it, but the problem is that I'm not sure we can disclose what I'm not sure he can disclose what he knows.
That's right. So information about it. I would also say that we have different protocols from Canada to the United States. We're not totally seamless. Anyone who's gone through the States knows that sometimes you go through, you got to automatically take your shoes off. In Canada, you don't. But when traveling into the United States, and so when you look at all those airlines, then you see how Canadians start to get impacted because those airlines will be impacted. And again, as Karen was saying, what happens at the border, you want to make sure you know, hey, I travel with kids. Like, it's good sometimes to be able to throw up a laptop and put a movie on. But aside from all of this, I think it is something that will be difficult to find out because they can just say security. We have known threats, and so we're going to ban all these things, and Canada has to as well. And it might be a difficult choice for Mr. Trudeau.
All right. I want to get to the budget because tomorrow is a big deal. Conservatives have a motion on the floor saying no further tax hikes, get help to hire the youth, return to the balanced budget by 2019, good luck with that, and no airport privatization moves. Marco, you're here to spill the beans.
Not happening. Not happening.
Okay.
Sorry to disappoint you and your viewers.
And the numbers plummet.
That's right.
I'll start with Karen and you can react. I mean, really, are any of these things realistically going to be in the budget? We've already heard the airport privatization's off the table. I can't imagine tax hikes unless they go and do the capital gains increasing.
Which we hear it's going to happen.
Okay,
right?
would that be a bad thing to tax the rich a bit more?
Well, I think we have to look at the fact that today it was even spoken in the House in our opposition motion, it's not just rich people who have secondary residence or primary residence used for business. So we have to look into those things as well.
Most MPs, I mean. Okay, no,
yes, but they were showing people that family income is $50,000 that may be subjected to this as well. In this motion, we also talked about the fact about the middle class. We've heard about the middle class and those who would like to join it. It has become quite the slogan for the opposition parties, that's for sure. And when we're talking about that, we see the middle class. There was some stats that came out from the Minister of Family, Children and Social Development, showing that there's been a 10% increase of people that don't feel that they're in the middle class anymore, that they've actually dropped. And that the fact for our future that everybody's concerned about precarious work. I always state, I have 5 kids and 2 of them are in college right now. I'm concerned what's going to happen. Are there going to be jobs when they come out? Or are we going to just continue putting into temporary jobs for the summer like they have done with the Canada Summer Jobs? What is their plan? When it comes to higher taxes, I'm sorry, I just don't see there not being a tax increase. I don't see it being a zero tax increase for everything across the board. Not at all. We saw even the tax decreases, volunteer firefighter tax credits, I see those being done, which means more taxes are being paid.
All right, well, I'll get yours in a second, Marco, since you're not revealing the budget to me. But Nathan, realistically, can they raise taxes in this environment when Donald Trump's America is getting ready to cut them?
Well, they could. Well, first of all, there's just a report out by the Congressional Budget Office in the United States comparing Canada and the U.S., all G20 countries, and shows Canada's 10 points down below what the U.S. is. So even if Trump goes radical crazy on his tax plan, it would be almost impossible for him to drop below Canada. So Canada's going to remain competitive regardless of what Trump does, unless he really goes crazy, which it wouldn't be, well, who knows. The notion, though, is that there's an $800 million tax loophole in the budget right now. So all we ask Mr. Trudeau do is fulfill his campaign promise, because he promised to limit the use of stock options as a tax loophole. We know when you get through the tax filings that the people who use those loopholes overwhelmingly are in that top 1% that Mr. Trudeau says should be taxed more. So if that's the case, then just fulfill your campaign promise. I mean, it's not so much to ask. And so they float these balloons. They were going to tax benefits. Remember at one point they said
health and
dental, and they floated that out. And then they did a bunch of polling and found out, nope, kill that one. And then they were going to privatize airports and seaports. And now there seem to be, we'll see tomorrow, walking away from that one. So this is what they're looking around the couch for change right now, because they're running such huge deficits. They're trying to find a way to pay for it all.
Are you feeling a little squeezed by the fact that you can't really boost the deficit higher than $30 billion this year, and yet you've still got a big pile of commitments that have to be acted on? How tough is this tight wire going to be for Bill Morneau to walk tomorrow?
Well, I'm feeling very proud about the work that Minister Morneau has done, as well as our government.
Unless you know what's in the budget.
And we're feeling confident, and we're feeling reasonably assured that we're on the right course, which Canadians gave us a mandate to implement. And what I mean very specifically by that is to continue giving a tax break to the middle class,
and
to ensure,
and
to ensure,
and
well, those are real Canadians. I mean, I appreciate that Nathan wants to be conversational about it, but there are real hardworking Canadians out there who do appreciate having more disposable income vis-a-vis the tax break, which we provided, as well as the Canada Child Benefit Plan, which is lifting hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. So there's no joke or punchline there. Those are real lives. Sorry, if I could just be permitted to finish. And the other thing I would say is,
don't look back. I saw that's the last year's budget.
What that will mean is investments in infrastructure. So whether you live in a big city or in rural Canada, that means better roads and better transit. It means investment in an innovation strategy. It means investment in climate change. It means investment in our Indigenous peoples, which we saw neglected for far too long. These are concrete, important commitments, which we will continue to adhere to.
Right.
There was one other promise they made, which was to lower the small business tax level. So for all those middle-class people they keep talking about and not being glib, the minister today said, well, it was a good line. It was a good headline for the campaign. Yeah. But as to whether you're actually going to do it, she said, well, it was a good punchline. I mean, it wasn't anything more than that for me.
I was going to run a clip, but I'll pass on that. On this showdown that's going on up at Parliament Hill over procedural changes to the House of Commons, including sitting only 4 days a week instead of 4.5, and including getting the Prime Minister in for 1 day a week instead of 4, or 3 or 4. it's a big showdown.
Oh, yeah.
You're going tonight. What's the
I'll be there
problem
as
here?
well.
It sounds like
What's the problem? We see, and you know, I saw it once again today in the House of Commons, where we hear from the government, we're not going to take any advice from you, and that's what we're seeing here as we're going into Proc Committee. They don't want to hear opposition to what they're proposing. This discussion paper is saying this is what we're going to do, and we see the members of the government that are sitting on this committee saying the exact same thing. The Prime Minister's attendance record has improved in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and I applaud him for being there, because last time
week it wasn't much.
Yeah, because last time he didn't come to work last year. Last year he barely showed up. So I'm glad that he's here a little bit more.
Well, you weren't sitting either.
But the fact is, 1 day a week, he wants to be in the House of Commons. He doesn't answer questions when he's in the House of the Commons in the first place. We're asking him questions. I think he needs to start being more accountable.
Nothing new about that.
There's something more to this, though.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry.
Oh no,
ahead,
and I
Ray.
think when it comes to different things like committees, they're looking at the way that they want to do committees and reducing, so we can't have filibusters and talking. 10 minutes is going to be what we can. We are being closed down as opposition MPs to speak. And in our case, 7 million votes for the Liberals, 6 million votes for the Conservatives, and they're trying to shut us up.
I'm going to let you have the last
6 million.
word. Sure. I'm going to get Marco to explain why on earth these are being rammed through. These are changing it for all parties, not just the governing party. Why can't you let everyone have a say in a vote and do it in a timely manner without getting
We are,
fast-tracking
and
it?
in fact, a discussion paper is meant to facilitate just that, a discussion about it, and I wouldn't be too quick to judge what the outcomes will be. Other examples of how parliamentary democracy works, for example, in the United Kingdom, demonstrate that you can have accountability, ministerial accountability, and there are different intervals and time allocation for that. But the important thing is that we bring Parliament into the 21st century, that we ensure that it is open,
So
that it is open and transparent. Well, sometimes look at for those people
You
who
only
are
sat 128 days last year.
for those people who are critical about eliminating Friday sittings, what I would say is you'd have a full day of work back in the constituency so that you are accessible to your residents, something that I know that both of my colleagues work as well at.
Yeah, okay. I've got to wind it up really quickly. Give me your
sure.
last thoughts on this.
So the fact that Mr. Trudeau only wants to show up 1 day a week to be held to account is of a concern. But what's also buried in these changes is that it gives the government total control over the timeline and the agenda of everything that goes on in Parliament, and in fact shuts down debate. Mr. Harper was accused of this, and in fact did this when he was Prime Minister more than anybody else had. Just cut off debate, used the guillotine and said, that's it, I don't want to hear from you anymore, it's moving on. Mr. Trudeau's proposal is even worse and more radical. And if Harper had ever tried this, Don, it would have been screaming from the rafters. The point is that the opposition has a role to do on behalf of Canadians. Hold the government to account, ask the hard questions, and oppose things that we don't think are good for the country. Liberals are they are ramming this through, by the way, at the committee level, under restricted things, not
sure
allowing that debate. So we got to push back. It's our
Not
job.
sure that's a fair
and it's an important
characterization.
thing that Mr. Trudeau gets back to his sunny ways statement.
Sunny ways. Time to
Looking pretty sunny outside
All
right
right.
now. So
Thank you
thanks.
both.
Really?
We'll see how this goes.
good.
All right. And